Welcome to another episode of Slishman Essentials. Hello and welcome to my guest, Dr. Scott Forman. He is the inventor of Héros Shears, and these have just come to life this month, really. So Scott and I actually go way back. I graduated from University of New Mexico Emergency Medicine Residency Program. Scott graduated a few years after me. We've talked a lot about device development through the years. I saw the earliest shears, and now it's just awesome to see these come to life. So, Scott, can you give me your 2-minute pitch? Why do I want to own a pair of your shears? And then we'll dig deeper.
Awesome. Well, Sam, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. And it's great to connect with you. Finally, at this point, after so many iterations and trials and tribulations, getting this product finally into the hands of the people who need it most. So the purpose of the Héros Shears has always been to create the most reliable, dependable tool for accessing a patient, and which is, as you know, just absolutely critical in our line of work, especially in a pre-hospital setting, but certainly in the emergency department as well, being able to expose underlying injuries and to be able to cover anything to do so. So confine injuries in any venue, from austere to urban. And anybody can be wearing anything at any time. So being able to cut through a Kevlar vest for somebody who's wearing one, in either it be military or security personnel, being able to cut through bunker gear for an injured firefighter, being able to access a skier on the mountain, whether it be country or backcountry, cutting through ski boots, cutting through any sort of gear, cutting through a spacesuit, for example, where one of our prototypes went fairly recently on a launch because it was the only pair of shears that could cut through the Nomex fire retardant material, which is like an aramid material, super dense, like Kevlar, and can also cut through the neoprene gaskets and the metal O-rings. And because ours were the only shears that could do it, they went on one of the with the emergency responders to be able to do an emergency extrication if that was necessary.
I'll throw in an odd question, right? I can carry these on a plane?
You can carry them on a plane. So TSA has regulations regarding carrying a pair of scissors on the plane with you, and as long as they are not sharp on the end, so pointed on the end, and as long as they don't extend beyond 4 inches past the pivot point, they are TSA carry-on compliant.
Was that a factor in your designing?
It was a consideration. We certainly wanted to optimize. We spent, one of the reasons it took us so long to get where we finally are is because we were really rigorous about ensuring that the tool first and foremost could be a performance tool and could cut through robust materials. And in order to do so, you can't do it with a pair of wimpy shears. And so we optimized the length as well as the ergonomics and the way, the amount of leverage that you can generate with your hand and your wrist and your forearm in a good cutting position. That was all taken into consideration, and we wanted to make them as long as we could to be able to optimize both shearing force as well as the mechanics of shearing. But certainly you don't want to make them so long that they're unwieldy, and you don't want to make them so heavy from a material standpoint that no one's going to carry them. And we did consider where are they going to go, and we want them to go everywhere. What's the easiest way to take them? So extending beyond that 4 inches was in initial prototypes was something that we had looked at and then realized that we don't need to in order to get where we need to be with respect to performance.
Well, Yeah. So you can go back to the real beginning, even before I mean, tell me about your light bulb moment, but the things that led up to Shears. I mean, what are all the things you've been doing in your life that led to that product?
Great question. So the answer is quite simply the epiphany happened in a coffee shop, and the idea was drawn on a napkin. As many great ideas I've been told are, this was certainly my first in that way. I was in medical school. I had just started a new career path that I was very excited about, that was very intentional from one that was seemingly very different. And I was on a bit of a circuitous route. I had worked for many years in the outdoor industry, worked as a professional international mountain guide and climbing instructor. And one of the essential tools in that domain is a carabiner. It's a simple device, but it's life-saving, and it's absolutely critical to keep a climber and everyone on a rope team, or anyone connected either by way of the sharp end and the belay end of a rope,
So
safe.
the light bulb moment, though, was it the carabiner part, or
The
that's
light bulb, the
going?
light bulb, the light bulb moment was really the marriage between two critical tools in two different areas of my life. So I had transitioned from being a mountain guide into teaching wilderness medicine, and I was trained as a WEMT. And then I worked as an EMT on the street for a little while as I was doing pre-med, and then worked in a hospital as a trauma tech while I was doing pre-med and some graduate coursework leading up to medical school. And the essential tool in a pre-hospital environment is a pair of trauma shears.
Yeah,
And
we'll put a picture up here just to show people what that original one looked like. It
there
was.
it is.
I
Yeah.
remember this, and you made how many of these did you make? You made
I,
quite a
I,
few.
I made 1,100 of them in my garage, and I sent them out to everywhere in the world. It was all word of mouth. I didn't have a website. Uh, I did finally as a way of fulfillment, but I wasn't spending any money on marketing. The very first pair of shears that I ever sold was completely unintentional. I had built a prototype very similar to these and showed up in residency with a pair clipped to my belt. And one of the most common issues with trauma shears is that the paradigm hasn't changed in over 50 years. So they've never been reinvented. And so I took a pair of trauma shears that were titanium nitride coated, that still had been built in China, but were a little bit hardier stainless steel and had a bit more of aggressive serration on them. And I banded a climbing carabiner along the axis and epoxied it to the handle, and clipped them onto my belt, and walked into the emergency department one day for a shift. And I was in the recess room at UNM, and a trauma comes in, a bad motorcycle injury, and the guy hadn't been stripped down, and we didn't know where all of his injuries were. Everyone was distracted because the one injury everyone could see was that one of his right upper appendages was barely hanging on, and the guy had a major mechanism, and we needed to expose him. And everyone's, the trauma room's full, as you can imagine it, and everyone's fumbling, looking for trauma shears to cut him out. And I just reached to my belt, unclipped him, dropped him on the patient, and I said, "Can someone please expose this patient?" And everything stopped. Like there's this like quiet, and one of the techs looks at me, and she picks him up, and she said, "Where did you get these?" And I said, "I made them, and let's talk about that after we take care of the patient." And so she cuts all the clothing away. We expose the patient. I left that shift, the end of that shift, I left with 30 orders for trauma shears. And so I remember going back home and telling my wife, I was totally exhausted. I said, "Wow, I think I just might have a business model here." I just sold 30, I guess took 30 orders of trauma shears for pretty much everybody in the emergency department right now. And I didn't do anything except just make mine available.
So
So the next step in that is
the
that
other, you
as
gotta, the patient survived, or
the patient did make it to
okay,
he made
all
it
right,
to the OR. Yeah, no, great question.
back to
Um,
the story.
so that yeah that small pregnant pause was not enough to affect the outcome, fortunately, of the care that was delivered or how the patient did. Um, so the next step in this was that I had a friend who was doing laser engraving professionally out of his house. And so it was crazy. I mean, I was, barely getting any sleep, as this was my uh, first year of residency. Um, and I'd come home from my shifts and I would uh, assemble, bandsaw carabiners and epoxy them and put them in a vise and let them dry overnight. And then the next day, I'd go to the post office and send them out all over the world, or deliver them personally to people that had placed orders. And in the meantime, I was like, the other way to ensure that they're going to get back to you, so I made them accessible, is I took them to a buddy that was laser engraving. And so, en route to the post office, I would stop by his place and I'd sit there and shoot the breeze with him while he would laser engrave, personalized laser engraving, for an additional $5 I would charge. And they'd get their name on them so that if they did lose their trauma shears, hopefully it would come back to them. And that caught on.
So there's about
So that was the start.
there's a good gap between today and then, because I remember those shears. I remember Paul Auerbach taking those to Haiti. I
Yep,
remember there was a lot of buzz and excitement about it, and
that's right.
and then we didn't. I moved, and then I had some kids, and we were out of touch for quite a few years. I guess until about a couple of years ago, and then all of a sudden, you show me these things, which are, you know, quite a bit different from that original model. So I don't know how much you're game to go into some of the valleys along the way, but what happened? What are the pitfalls, and how'd
Whew.
you get?
Great, great. It's a great story in the sense that all good stories are, there's a lot of elements, and so some may pique people's interest and some may be just really banal. But the long and the short is that we went through. Um, well, let me start by just saying that my intention was, number one, I needed to finish residency, so I ceased and desisted, even when I had a bunch of orders that I just simply declined to fulfill. I said I felt very strongly in two different ways. One was that the product I was delivering, I was doing so at a tremendous loss in terms of time away from my family, as well as time away from my residency training, which was first and foremost. But even even that, I felt that the product that I was providing was not the product that it could be. And um, it felt like, I had this idea for for creating a utility shear that could truly do the job that I wanted it to do. And that took more work than I ever would have imagined. You think about the state of technology now and the things that can be done so quickly. A vaccine to fight COVID in a matter of months from the start of a global pandemic. But you'd think just building a pair of scissors should be just the simplest thing in the world. And what I've learned is it is not at all. So the first thing I did is I reached out to a couple of design firms and I said, hey, can you help me model this? I don't understand. I sort of understood because I had this jig that I had a buddy make for me to help create better shearing mechanics on the scissors that I was making in my garage. And so it was a bending fixture. And so I'd bend the blades just so by hand to try and get really good cutting performance without impeding the articulation of the shears or the operation of the shears. And so I started to learn just by, trial and tribulation, what shearing mechanics was, and then reached out to some engineers to help me design uh, really good trauma shears. And this was after residency, so this was starting in you know late 2009, 2010, 2011. And um, I'd worked with two different firms here in Albuquerque. And then I started looking elsewhere. And then I found a guy who had recently left and was doing contract work for Los Alamos, living up in Santa Fe, a guy named Todd Myers, who really shared my passion for this project. And I said, would you be interested? I can't pay you a whole lot. I can pay you hourly, or if you want, be a partner in this enterprise with me and work on it like I am, as a sort of a side gig, and let's see what we can come up with. And in like 2012, I think, is when Todd came on board and really took this to a different level. He's a design engineer, and
Is that
so we
the
started.
is that the Sandia Labs connection, or when did?
No, actually, so the Sandia Labs connection happened around that same time. I think that was in 2013 or 2014. We applied for a Mexico Small Business Association grant, and the grants that occur through a mandate that the national labs, Los Alamos and Sandia, have with New Mexico is to help provide some startup support for local businesses in New Mexico by providing engineering time and resources. And so we applied for that grant with this project, and what we specified in that grant was that we wanted help with two things. One is material selection and blade performance, shearing performance. And so we were lucky enough to partner, and Todd was on board at that time, and we had already gone through multiple prototypes and looked at different materials. And Mark Reese was the Sandia engineer, materials engineer, who got involved. And we were initially given 6 months to work on the project. Mark, after working on it for about 3 months, said, this is going to take more time, and I really like this. So he appealed to have the grant extended for a year. And after that, he ended up working on it some on his own time for another 3 or 4 months. And that was pivotal in really getting to the core of what kind of stainless we wanted, what processes, from not just a design, but a design for manufacture standpoint, we needed for the greatest efficiency, because a lot of the most robust stainless steels can be very expensive, or they can require post-processing, like, superheating and then a cryo quench in order to create stability and have them be less brittle. But those are expensive processes. So just selecting the materials. And then it was Mark, actually, he said, what are the cutting parameters? And I had by then accumulated just literally closets full of material that we tried cutting through, everything from fiberglass and orthoglass and carbon fiber sheeting to different Kevlar. So I had rolls and rolls of Kevlar and Nomex material. And I said, I want to cut everything from dense weave, loose weave gauze to dense weave materials and everything in between, and really, really thick, hardy materials. So orthoglass, for example, the stuff that we use for splitting in the ER, I want to be able to cut it soft. I want to be able to cut it when it's fully formed and hardened.
Well,
And
let me ask about digging deeper into that. I mean, in your videos and other that you talk about cutting like a shark. How is that? Was there a moment where someone said, let's build this like shark teeth, and it's not totally clear to me how this resembles shark teeth.
yeah,
I'm really
so
sure.
absolutely. So that was Mark. That was Mark's epiphany. I remember he called me one night. It was late in the evening. He'd already spent a full day working at the lab. And he said, Scott, I have this idea. I've been doing some research about where, he said, you always look to nature to find the most effective shearing forces that we've ever encountered. So if we can come in and imitate nature, that's always going to help us, because we can reverse engineer that anything that we see in the, out in the natural world. And he said, so he started Google searching. It's like, where do we find in the animal kingdom the greatest shearing forces, the greatest amount of leverage, the greatest amount of optimized effective shearing? And so let me explain very quickly what we were looking for in terms of greatest shearing performance. So it's not just the ability to shear through or cut through materials. Truly good shearing, and one of the things we learned the hard way is that cutting through a material and being able to continue cutting through material is completely contingent on being able to clear that material once you've made that initial shear. So if it doesn't clear, if it doesn't bring it in like a conveyor belt, if it doesn't draw the material in, shear it, and then clear it away, then it bunches. And that bunching can lead, as we've all experienced when you're cutting through any material, often cloth or something that has a tendency to bunch up, it can displace the shears, and then that's your last cut until you clear the material and start again, which is highly inefficient. So the best way to shear is to have the material drawn in, shear through it, clear it away, and get ready for the next cut, which happens because you've drawn in more material as you're displacing the material that was just sheared. That's what a shark does. That's what a great white shark's teeth do. And it's really interesting. They have these serrations on them, but also it's the pitch and the angle and the spacing between those serrations that accounts for the shearing forces that are able to be delivered, as well as, of course, the angle of pivot and the amount of torque that's being able to generated by the bite. But it's that displacement of material, drawing material in and shearing through it, that is most most efficient. And so Mark, once he saw that, just started doing measurements, and he said, I can help you with optimizing your shearing if you can create a serration pattern that mirrors what we see in a great white shark's mouth. And we did, and he built it, and we tested it for months and months and months. And at the end of it, we came up with something pretty darn good.
Yeah. And the metal itself, that is, where's that from? And do you want to say anything else about the type of metal?
You bet. So it's a high carbon, high grade stainless steel. And we ended up partnering with a manufacturing company out of Indianapolis called Engineered Medical Systems, and they've been in business for decades doing medical devices. And they sourced two companies, first and foremost. So they looked at Kershaw, a company that's been doing knives for many years, based out of Oregon. And then realized that Kershaw was owned by a company that had been doing knives, blades, surgical instruments, all sort of cutting instruments, called Kai in Japan, for decades longer. So they've been around for over 100 years. So they build everything from razor blades to samurai swords. And they are specialists in sourcing a high grade Japanese high carbon steel and creating high precision instruments that are designed both for the medical industry and for utility cutting. And so once we partnered with Engineered Medical Systems, they sent me several samples of shears that Kai had been manufacturing, very high end shears. And I started cutting through all of the materials in my closet, and we realized that they were really good. And then asked them what it would take to build our tool and to incorporate the serration design that we had specified in working with New Mexico through that New Mexico Small Business Association grant with Sandia National Labs. And they prototyped it for us, and it took even an incredibly effective set of shears, and it took it to a whole new level. We were able to cut through things. 38. We stopped just because it got so thick, but we can cut through 38 layers of Kevlar
I've used mine.
repeatedly without. Yeah.
Honestly, mine are, it should be a medical tool, but I keep it in my shop. I have cut 1 3/4 rope with it quickly, and it's
Yep.
quite a remarkable device you made.
Thank you.
And so now, how many of them have you built, and how are you going to scale this? How are you going to get it to the planet, to everybody in the world?
So we've built approximately 2,000 of them. We've sent about 200 of those out into the wild for testing over the last 6 months or so. And the rest, so approximately 1,750, are available right now on Indiegogo. So we launched that crowdfunding campaign earlier this month, and we have that number available for virtually immediate delivery after the campaign's over. So we expect to fulfill all of those orders up to 1,750 by the beginning of August. And our intention is to, based on how quickly we're able to create virality and engagement, to do additional production runs.
I mean, so I remember the night that I got the notice that Indiegogo starts tomorrow, and my heart did a weird thing. It was like, oh man, I hope he's not disappointed. And I can imagine that you had that tenfold, and not disappointed at all. I mean, it just blew it off the map. And so really congratulations already. I mean, the Indiegogo campaign is going on right now, but that had to have been quite an experience that morning. Let's dig into that and say tell us the Indiegogo story and where you're at with it right now.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sam. It was exhilarating and terrifying. Yeah. Absolutely. At the time that we launched, and it's been certainly a source of pride and humility at the same time, because I myself and the team, we know everything that's gone into that process, and all the consideration and the investment has been tremendous. And it's nice to see that people get it, that they're supportive, and that they want to see this in the marketplace, and that they're interested in not only having their own tools, but also having them in the hands of others who need it. The process leading up to the choice of doing a crowdfunding launch and using Indiegogo, it's been in the back of my mind for years. And even in working with EMS, Engineered Medical Systems, also they have a sister company called Pulmodine who've been doing our final assembly, and with whom we have the agreement. Using their distributors and their channels for getting this out, it seemed to me that it left something on the table with an opportunity to create engagement and virality that you can only see through crowdfunding. And so crowdfunding is used by by individuals as well as by small startup companies. And then we've also seen over the years a lot of utilization of crowdfunding for more established companies, launching mainstream products for the intention of not just building revenue, but sometimes more importantly, or what appears to be a higher priority, just to create that virality, and use social media for greater marketing engagement. And so that was the hope.
You picked $5,000 as your starting point, and would you have been happy with that or not? Where does that number even come from?
Yeah, good question. So the answer is quite simply that based on our investment, it doesn't make sense, and it's looking at two different things. So it's looking at consumer psyche, as well as looking at metrics and analytics and what happens behind the scenes for crowdfunding campaigns. And to be honest with you, a host of other online marketplaces where a lot of it is driven by algorithms. And so the choice to pick a relatively low funding goal and to make it flexible rather than fixed was all predicated around wanting to just blow that goal, that funding goal out of the water as quickly as we possibly could. And certainly there was a lot of fear going up to it, like, is 5,000 too high? Is it going to create a perception of, lower value? What are we doing with respect to the perk or the product that we're going to be delivering? Does it cheapen it in any way, making it too low, or does it, or is it going to feel like it's arbitrary? And the answer is quite simply, it was chosen as something that we thought we could achieve fairly quickly. We were hoping to hit the $5,000 mark based on some of our pre-market testing and seeding. We were hoping to hit that within several hours, or maybe up to 12 or 24 hours, in which case those algorithms that look at how quickly you exceed your funding goal kick in. But what we were delighted and absolutely astounded to see was that we surpassed our funding goal in 18 minutes.
So yeah, pretty shocking. So where are you? I haven't seen the latest numbers. Where are you now? And what when you get to the end of the month, what happens to that money, and what are your next steps?
So currently we're sitting right around the $57,000 mark. So we've more than exceeded our funding goal by well over 1,000%. And like most campaigns, which is just a super interesting space to occupy, there's a bit of a plateau where engagement doesn't taper, but you start to see, rather than a whole lot of orders being placed quickly, you see kind of orders being placed at a more at a slower cadence. And what we've been told, so we've got a number of VIPs, people who had made reservations for product at a special launch pricing in our pre-market buildup that still have yet to make their purchases. And again, based on human psyche, it's not uncommon that people kind of wait and they're like, I've got 30 days to do it, I'm going to do it later. And we expect to see some of those conversions later in the campaign, toward maybe in the last 48 to 72 hours. And additionally, a lot of people who just click on the button, the heart, and say, I want to follow the campaign and just see how it goes, looking to see how successful it is. They watch the comments, they watch the messaging that goes out from us. They look at the engagement from other customers and see how questions are responded to. Sometimes they have questions themselves, so they've been reaching out to us directly through social media or otherwise. Contact the campaign manager. So we've been fielding those questions on a regular basis, and then hope that we have a high conversion rate toward the end of the campaign.
The last day of the campaign is which?
So the last day of the campaign is the 25th of this month, I believe.
All right. So will you be using distributors, or how are you going to once it gets to once it starts flight, what are you going to do? How are you going to get it out there continuously?
So our plan is to twofold. Once the campaign's over, we expect to continue with e-commerce. We'd like to use Indiegogo in demand, which is just basically a real-time marketplace for being able to provide fulfillment. So continue to use that venue. It's a fairly seamless transition. So we're looking at and exploring different e-commerce, including the Amazon marketplace. And then we would love to be able to partner with other medical device distributors, Rescue Essentials and others who provide EMS equipment on a regular basis. There's a whole host of them that we've been in contact with through the years, who have been very excited about this product and waited for it to launch in order to bring it into their catalogs. And then, of course, EMS, Engineered Medical Systems, has a line of different distributors that they work with in the pre-hospital space, as well as military, et cetera, that we hope they're going to be utilizing to get this out into the world.
Yeah. And I'll wrap up in just a short bit, but do you think that you'll have some alternative versions coming out? Are you going to shrink it and pink it at some point? I learned that years ago in an economics class. And
yeah, it's, and it's funny too, because it's so relevant. We've done so much market surveying over the years to ask people, their idea of like, what's the perfect set of trauma shears, especially with EMS folks. And so they say, I want it to be carryable, and they love those tiny little shears that you can barely cut anything with. So there's the small form factor, kind of the mini me version of trauma shears that have been around for a while, that a lot of people carry just because they're just so small and easy to carry. But I think from a utility standpoint, they probably just don't cut it, pun intended.
Yeah.
The other part of this, the shrink it and pink it, is that the number one color, beyond black, actually, that outranks black as the favorite, is pink handled trauma shears. They sell like crazy, and so we've had tons and tons of requests for a pink version. And so our intention in the future, and we've already started design work on a smaller form factor and lighter form factor of our shears that don't compromise in cutting performance, because that is really our primary objective, is to never compromise for those who need it, need the tool to be able to perform. But we do want to make it a little bit more carryable, and a little bit lighter, and pink, absolutely, multicolors.
Let me ask one other question regarding, the holster. The topic of the holster comes up periodically. And what's your reply to that? I have an earlier version of the holster, but I know that's
absolutely
in process.
Absolutely, great question. And so, in our effort to get the shears to market, we absolutely knew that we had to have something to sheath them. We had to have something to protect them when they're being carried, as well as not everyone wants to just clip them to the belt loop and have a sharp instrument dangling around, especially with a ripper, as a possibility for exposure. So we designed a holster that we decided we wanted to be really lightweight, that we wanted to be equally indestructible, but this is what we came up with, and we're really proud of the design. But what we're a lot of the feedback that we've gotten, and from my own use of this since we started prototyping and designing, is that it's not exactly what we want it to be, but it does accomplish the objective of keeping them well protected. It's ambidextrous, just like the shears. So the belt clip is detachable, and it can be mollied back. It can be worn on your belt. It's adjustable. It can fit on either side. But it's the material. It's not Kydex. It's a nylon, very hardy nylon that's been seam welded to make sure that it's, again, just super durable. waterproof, can be rinsed off, etc. But it's not our ultimate objective of what we want in a holster design. So a couple of things that we've been working on and piloting, and I'll show you here first. First time to be seen anywhere other than on my hip in the emergency department. This is a prototype that we've been working on that I'm super excited about. So it's a magnetized version, and the way it works is the shears just literally sit inside and clip on, and the magnets engage with it. And so it's very, very fast. It protects the blade. It's super low profile. The material that we're using here is just a 3D printed model, and then the magnets have been put in, and it's a much more durable material. It's got a much hardier feel to it, and also is MOLLE clippable and accepts the same belt clip that we have on the other holster. So that was a stretch goal for us, that we would, if we hit $250,000 in our campaign, we would have this design for manufacture and have molds made so that we could mass produce it. My hope is that we get to a point where we're successful enough with this tool that we can afford to build those molds and to launch the next generation of the holster.
So in the Indiegogo campaign right now, when people order a holster, they will get the previous version, right?
That's correct. They'll get this version. Yeah, which is perfectly functional. It's and like I said, it's designed as much a holster as it's designed as a sheath to protect the blades and to protect the carrier.
All right. So Scott, are there other questions you think I should have asked, or other things you want to tell us before we wrap up?
Other than I didn't get a chance to ask you any questions, Sam, which is I think it would be super edifying for your audience to hear more about your journey to the products that you have been so successful with in the EMS space. But
I appreciate
perhaps another time.
Yeah, in a different bit. I'm actually really good answering questions about the valleys. So, but anyway, I really appreciate your doing this.